So this is a group A piece, which means it has a backing track that we need to play with. So in the middle of the page at the top, you can see it says On the Right Foot, which is the title of the piece. And beneath that, towards the left, at the start of the piece, you can see there's a letter A in a box. So that's telling you that this is section A, so it's the first section of the song. Next to the A, you can see it says Solid Funk. So that's the genre of the piece, the style of the piece. So it's just giving you a heads up on the style of music you'll be playing, which is funk. So this piece is specifically like 70s style funk. Bands like Rufus and Earth, Wind and Fire. So it's a good idea to listen to bands like that just to familiarise yourself with the style of music and also the style of drumming that you're going to be playing. Next to that, you can see it says the quarter note equals 90. That's the tempo of the piece. So the quarter note pulse is going to be 90 beats per minute. So it's going to be 90 quarter notes every minute. Okay, so it's just letting you know the tempo. And beneath that, you can see we've got our first bar of music. So you've got the clef there, which is the percussion clef or the neutral clef, just letting you know you've got drum notation on the stave. Okay, and then you can see next to that we've got our time signature, so we're in 4/4, so we've got 4 beats in the bar, and each beat is a quarter note. Okay, so if you look at that first bar of music, you can see you just got 4 quarter notes on the bass drum, so a nice easy start. So just on the bass drum, you've got hitting those 4 quarter notes, all the downbeats, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then in the next bar, you've got 3 quarter notes on the bass drum, so you've got 1, 2, 3 on the bass drum, and then you've got a crash and snare drum together on the 4. So the rhythm of that bar is also quarter notes. You've got 1, 2, 3, and then 4 with the hands. So we got. And you can see above the crash, you've got an accent there, so you're just going to have some emphasis on that note, so hit that with some power. And at the start of the first bar, at the bottom, you can see we've got dynamics there. So you've got MF, mezzo forte, which means half loud, which is about your normal playing level. Okay, so we're going to give those 2 bars a go, just lining them up. We'll loop them through 4 times. So we're going to play those 2 bars, get the accent on the crash and the snare, and also get that dynamic for both bars. Mezzo forte, half loud. And at the end of line 1, you can see there's a double bar line, just letting you know the music's going to be changing as we go to the next line. So looking at line 2, the first bar of line 2, we've got bar 3 there. So we've got a groove now. So we've got a hand rhythm at the top. So we've got quarter notes on the hi-hat. So the hi-hat's going to play those 4 downbeats, 1, 2, 3, 4. We've got the snare on 2 and 4, so our back beats. We've put those 2 parts together. We've got. And then on the bass drum, we're just playing the 1 and the 3. So you've got a quarter note on the 1 on the bass drum, a quarter note rest on 2, so no bass drum on the 2, quarter note on the bass drum on the 3, and a quarter note rest on the 4. Okay, so the bass drum just playing. Okay, so just hitting that 1 and 3. So if we put that together, our groove on line 2 is. Alright, so let's just get used to that groove. So we'll loop it through 4 times. And then in bar 2 of line 2, you can see we've got a 1 bar repeat. Okay, so that just means repeat the previous bar, which is the groove. So we just play that groove again. And then coming into bar 3 on line 2, we've got a crash on the 1 for a quarter note. And again, we've got an accent on that crash. That loopy line is just telling you to let that crash note ring. Okay, then we've got hi-hat quarter notes for 2, 3, and 4. So you've got a crash on 1, hi-hat on 2, hi-hat on 3, hi-hat on 4, and we've got our snare drum coming in on the 2 and the 4 again. So the hands are playing. Okay, so it's that same quarter note groove with the hands, but you're just playing a crash on the 1 And on the bass drum this time, we've got a quarter note on the 1, quarter note rest on 2, and we've got eighth notes on the 3, quarter note rest on 4. So you've got a bass drum on the 1 with the crash. Then you play your 2 hands, so the hi-hat and snare on the 2. Then on the 3, you've got a hi-hat and bass drum. And then you've got a bass drum on the and of 3 by itself. Okay, then we've got a 4 together with the hands, hi-hat and snare together. Okay, so just be careful of that coordination on the 3rd beat where the hands are playing quarter notes, the right hand's playing a quarter note, and the right foot is playing eighth notes. Okay, just make sure on that and of 3, only the bass drum's playing. Don't let the right hand copy that and of 3. So putting that together, bar 3, our groove is this. Okay, so you see that and of 3 on its own, keeping those hands playing quarter notes. Okay, so a bit of independence for this bar, so let's give that bar a try 4 times through, just to get a feel for those eighth notes on the 3 on the bass drum. And then coming into the final bar of line 2, we've got half a bar of groove. So the first 2 beats are carrying on the quarter note groove. So we've got quarter notes with our hand, right hand on the hi-hat on 1, both hands, hi-hat and snare on the 2, and we've got a bass drum on the 1. So that's the same thing we've been doing on this line for the quarter note groove. And in the second half of the bar, beats 3 and 4, we've got a fill. So we've got an eighth note fill. So you've got 2 eighth notes on the snare drum. So you've got 3 and on the snare drum. And then you've got 4 and. So the 4 is on the small tom or the high tom. And the and of 4 is on the floor tom or the low tom. Okay. So what we're going to do, we're going to play that right. So we've got right, left on the snare for 3 and we're going to play right on the toms for 4 and. So you've got. Okay, you can also play that single strokes, but when you play it single strokes, you can get a bit caught up with the hands there on the tom. So right, left. If you've got a right crash over this side, because the note after this fill is a crash, you can kind of turn your body to kind of reduce the sort of caught upness of the hands, so the sort of crossing over of the hands. So if you start to turn towards that crash, you can open up a bit if you want to play at single strokes to crash on the right side. But today we've only got 1 crash on the left side, so we're just going to play those toms with the right hand. So right, and then we'll come across the crash here. Okay, so we don't want to kind of cross over if we're going back over here. Just makes it a bit trickier. So you've actually got a right-handed paradiddle there. Right, left, right for the fill. Okay. On the first note of the fill, which is the snare drum, we've got a bass drum as well. Okay, so we're going to put that bass drum in on the 3. So we've got half a bar of groove. So the first half bar of groove is. So that's your 1 and your 2, and then your 3 and 4 and. Bass drum on the 3, remember we've got. Okay, so putting those 2 parts together, we've got. Okay, so the rhythm 1, 2, 3 and 4 and. So let's just try that bar now, we'll loop it through 4 times. And now we'll try bars 5 and 6, so the last 2 bars of line 2. Okay, just making sure we can transition between those two bars nicely. So we've got the groove, starting with a crash. We've got that independence, that coordination on the 3rd beat with the bass drum, making sure we can play eighth notes whilst keeping the hands playing quarter notes. Then we've got half a bar of groove and half a bar of fill in the last bar on that line, okay? So let's just try putting those 2 bars together. And now we'll try the whole of line 2. So we've got our quarter note groove, we've got a repeat of that groove, then we crash into our quarter note groove with the bass drum playing eighth notes on the 3, and then the final bar, half a bar groove, half a bar fill. So let's try and put that whole line together now. And that brings us to the end of section A. So the end of line 2 is the end of section A. So we're going to put the two lines together. We're going to play the top line and the second line. Okay, so remember, our dynamic is MF, mezzo forte, half loud, which is about your normal kind of playing level, and that dynamic stays for both lines. Okay, so we're going to make sure we stay at mezzo forte. We don't want any peaks and troughs in our dynamic. We don't want to get louder at any point, only on those accents. Okay, so we've got those accents, those two crashes at the end of line 1 and on the third bar of line 2 as well. Okay, so those accents at the start of the bar. So we can put some emphasis on those notes, but for the dynamic throughout those two lines, just make sure it stays at mezzo forte. Okay, we don't want to get louder anywhere or get quieter. Keep it at that consistent dynamic. So let's try putting those two lines together now. And then we'll try lines 1 and 2 with the music. Okay, so remember we've got the tempo at the start of the piece. It's 90 beats per minute. Okay, so we've been practicing the parts at that tempo. Okay, so let's try it now with the music. We've got a count in. So in the top right of the piece, you can see it says the count in there. So let's just let you know the first bar of counting is a quarter note on 1, quarter note rest on 2, quarter note on 3, quarter note rest on 4, and then we've got a bar of quarter notes. So the counting is 2 bars long. We're going to hear 1, 3, and then 1, 2, 3, 4. So remember, use that counting to really feel the tempo. Don't just listen to it as like counting you down into starting the piece. You want to really feel that tempo when you hear the click. Okay, so when you listen to that counting, make sure you're absorbing the tempo. So when you start playing, you're playing at that tempo. Okay, so really listen to it. So you've got 2 bar counting, and then we're going to come in with the backing track, play lines 1 and 2. And now we come on to line 3. So at the start of line 3, you can see there's a letter B there in a box. So that's telling you this is section B. And you can see we've got a 7 there, just letting you know this is bar 7. So we're on bar 7 of the piece. So you've got 8th notes now with the right hand. So we're playing 8th notes on the cymbal. We've got a crash with an accent again, so make sure we put some emphasis on that first note on the 1. And then we've got 8th notes on the hi-hat. Okay, so the rhythm of that bar on the cymbal is 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, and that's our 8th notes, or quavers as they're known as well. So if we play that with the right hand, we've got okay, so constant 8th notes with that crash on the 1. The snare's playing the 2 and the 4, so we'll bring that in. Bass drum's playing the 1, resting on the 2, playing 3 and, so 8th notes on the 3, and then a rest on the 4. So the bass drum's playing 1, 3 and. Okay, so we got. So if we play those 2 parts together, so the hands and the bass drum, we've got. Okay, and then in the second bar of that line, so bar 8 of the piece, we've got the same groove, we just haven't got that crash on the first beat. Okay, so we're going to put those 2 bars together. We're going to loop it through to get a feel for that 8th note groove. And you can see the dynamics at the start of line 3. Beneath the first bar of line 3, you can see there's an F there. So that's short for forte, which means loud. So we're going to pick up the dynamic. The first section, section A, we played as mezzo forte, which is half loud. So now we're going to bring it up to loud. Okay, so really put some energy into this groove. Let's try the first groove of section B, so those first 2 bars of section B 4 times through. And then in bar 3 of line 3, you can see you've got a 1 bar repeat. So that means repeat the previous bar, which is the groove we just played. So it's the bar without the crash on 1. So it's got the hi-hat on 1. So we play that bar again. And then the last bar of line 3, we've got the same groove. We're just adding a snare on the and of 4. Okay, so we're playing 4 and on the snare. So we're playing the 2 and the 4 and. So we've got 1, 3. Okay, with the same part. So we've got right hand playing 8th notes on the hi-hat, bass drum playing the 1, the 3 and the and of 3. So let's try the final bar of line 3, which is bar 10. So we'll try that 4 times through just to get a hand of that snare drum playing those 2 8th notes, 4 and. And now we'll try the whole of line 3, so putting that whole line together. So we've got 4 bars, we crash in with our 8th note groove, then we've got the same 8th note groove without the crash, we repeat that bar, so the 8th note groove without the crash again, and then we come into our final bar where we were just adding that extra snare on the and of 4. Okay, so we need a really solid groove here, make sure those 8th notes are nice and evenly spaced, and we're bringing the dynamic. Okay, so we've got forte for this whole line, so make sure a lot of energy in this line, because we're playing it loud. Okay, so let's try the whole of line 3 now. And then into the last line, so line 4, you can see the first 3 bars are the same as the first 3 bars of the previous line in line 3. So we crash in with our 8th note groove, we play the 8th note groove again in the second bar without the crash, and then we've got a 1 bar repeat on the 3rd bar. So we're just playing that 8th note groove again without the crash. Okay, so we've got those same 3 bars we've just played in the previous line. So let's look at bar 14. So we've got a fill here, so we've got 8th note fill, we've got 1 and 2 and, we're going to play them as single strokes on the snare, and then you've got 3 and on the small tom, 4 and on the floor tom. Okay, so just constant 8th notes, starting on snare, up to tom, down to floor tom, and we've got a bass drum on the 1. So you can see this is just a quarter note on the bass drum, then we've got a quarter note rest on 2 and a half note rest for 3 and 4 on the bass drum. So the bass drum's only going to be playing the 1 and our hands are going to be playing constant 8th notes. Okay, so let's try that fill now. So we've got... Okay, so we'll just stick to single strokes for that whole fill. So let's just try that now with the metronome, just looping it through just to make sure we're getting those 8th notes nice and evenly spaced. And then after that fill, you can see in the last bar of the piece, so you know it's the last bar because you've got that final bar line there, that thick black line, well the thin black line and the thick black line, you know it's the final bar of the piece. We've just got a crash and bass drum there. You can see that loopy line on the crash, you're just going to let the note ring. You can also see there's an accent on the crash, you're going to put some emphasis on that note, hit it with some force, some extra force so it's louder. And you can also see there's a fermata above the note as well. So remember, a fermata is a pause, so we're going to prolong the note, we're going to hold it, so time kind of goes out the window here. So we're going to be listening to the track to see how long we prolong that note for, okay? So because it's ringing, when you hit that crash, you don't need to do anything extra, just make sure you've hit it with some force, you hit the accent, so it's ringing for that length of time, okay? And it's just going to ring longer than its normal duration. So you're just going to let that note ring until the piece finishes. Okay, so you're just going to pause on that note, so hit it and just let it ring through until the track finishes. Okay, so let's try the whole of the final line now. So we're just going to put the 3 bars of groove together, and then we've got a fill, finish with that crash, and we're just going to let that note ring for that fermata. Okay, so remember we're still in forte for this line, so it still needs that energy. Make sure that that groove is really solid, that 8th note groove. Okay, let's try and put the bottom line together. And now we'll try the whole of section B, so lines 3 and 4. So again, make sure that groove's really solid, that 8th note groove. So we've got a whole groove for the 3rd line, and then we've got 3 bars of groove for the final line, go into that nice 8th note fill, finish with that crash. Okay, so let's put section B together. And now we're going to put the whole piece together, so sections A and B, so all 4 lines of the piece. Okay, so remember in the first section, we're at mezzo forte, half loud, we're predominantly playing quarter notes for that groove, and then we go into section B, we bring up the dynamic to forte, so a bit more energy, a bit more volume, and we're also changing the subdivision for the groove to 8th notes. Okay, so make sure you get that nice transition into section B. So let's try and put the 2 sections together now. And now we're going to play the whole piece in time to the backing track. Okay, so for this piece, your main job as the drummer is to lay down a really strong foundation for the other musicians to play on. Okay, so the groove has got to be really solid, so make sure your subdivisions are nice and evenly spaced. So we've got quarter notes for our subdivision on the groove in the first section, section A, and then into 8th notes into section B. Okay, so make sure those subdivisions are nice and solid. The groove, bass drum and snare are really solid as well, so you're really punching them through the groove so the rest of the band can really sit on that groove. Okay, so that's your main job as the drummer for this piece. Make sure the fill at the end of section A is nicely leading into that change into the 8th notes when we go into section B, and obviously also that change into the forte section of the song. Okay, and we're ending with that fill, that nice 8th note fill into the crash at the end. Okay, so make sure it's really solid, and when you change into those 8th notes into section B, we're going to be locking in with a bass player. Okay, so make sure you're listening for that bass guitar with the backing track when you go into section B, and just make sure you're really locked in with him. Okay, so let's try the whole track now with the backing track. So remember, we practice through all the parts at song tempo, which is 90 beats per minute. So obviously that's the target tempo, that's the tempo you want to get to it eventually. So with all of these parts, play them at a tempo that's comfortable for you, right? So bring the tempo down, make sure you're playing the parts nicely and comfortably, okay? So you'll relax while you're playing them, because obviously that comes across in your playing. So if you're being rushed, if the tempo is too fast and you're just playing it at a tempo that's uncomfortable for you, that's going to come across in your playing, okay? So it's going to sound uncomfortable, and that defeats the purpose, okay? You want to make sure you're really relaxed and comfortable when you're playing these grooves, and that's going to come across in your playing, okay? So we want to make sure that groove's nice and relaxed and solid, and that's obviously going to sound a lot better to the listener, okay? So practice these parts at a tempo that's comfortable for you, and gradually build them up as you get more comfortable with the parts, okay? Until you're hitting that song tempo. Okay, so remember, that's the goal tempo. Take as long as you need to take to get to there.